sing thy name, I will drink thy name, and get all drunk o'er with thy name. I will sing thy name, I will drink thy name, and get all drunk o'er with thy name. Yogananda taught that the three great delusions of humanity are sex, wine, and money. And he said money he didn't call it the worst, but money can buy the other two. Money can buy sex, and money can buy alcohol or drugs. And so, yet, he gave us this chant, I will sing thy name, I will drink thy name, I will become drunk all with thy name. And so the idea of being drunk with ecstasy, is a metaphor that's in the tradition of the mystics of Persia and the Sufi mystics, and in Islam too, but I'm more familiar with the Sufi tradition. And Yogananda gave a wonderful and beautiful commentary on the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, and in which culture, partly to protect themselves from being labeled heretics, some of the mystical types, Sufis like Omar, would disguise their mysticism using, or convey it, as Rumi did, and others convey their mysticism through more familiar images of wine and sex and romance like that. We don't see that as starkly, as radically as we do in the Islamic and especially the Sufi tradition. We don't see that, certainly not in Christianity, unless you consider drinking the wine of the Eucharist sacrament, but it's not quite the same. Nobody gets drunk with that. Believe me, I tried. It tastes yucky, that stuff they use. Anyway, so here he talks about be silently drunk with God, but not lose your balance. Somewhere in his writings, he actually made a reference to a phenomena that exists, that I have observed in others who are Tipsomaniacs, meaning they're alcoholics. There are some people who can go through life with a drinking habit and somehow manage, okay? And I remember one man who was a real estate tycoon, quite wealthy, and he was a client of ours in my father's accounting practice many years ago, where Padma and I worked, and poor fellow, he was very fastidious in his habits and really a fine person. Why he drank every day, I have no idea, but there are people who do that. And so Yogananda, sort of used that imagery or that fact that people could be tipsy and still function. Now, I'm not recommending that part of it, but he says, invoke God as power in the temple of consciousness during the day. Let every action and every word you utter be tinged and tipsy with God-love intoxication. Talk and act sensibly as a man who drinks a lot and yet keeps his senses awake and in command. You see, that's what I'm referring to. There are people like that. I suppose people who don't have much experience with that think of drunks as violent or stumbling or whatever, or being silly or something, or violent. But such is not always the case, in some ways, unfortunately. Be drunk with God, and let every action of your daily life be a temple of God's memory. It's not God's memory, it's your memory of God, but that's a poetic way of putting it. Perform every action to please him, and in the indestructible shrine of your devotion, God will listen in every thought. He goes on and says things like, carry your love of God deep in your heart before you sleep. This is a very valuable thing for all of us to do. I don't know how you fall asleep or what techniques you use, but obviously we have to relax in order to fall asleep. If our mind keeps running, it's hard to sleep. So people have different techniques. When I was a child, I remember doing something that children do, some children, which is to sort of rock yourself to sleep, But this and variations on this have really been wonderful in my life. Sometimes I'll lie and I'll practice Hong Saw, meaning I'll watch my breath and chant Hong Saw, or I'll chant, I am thine, be thou mine. And sometimes it's moments I'm gone, and I do not generally fall asleep all that easily. Like many of you, my mind tends to revisit the day and plan the next day, and things come to my mind, don't they, to you, that the subconscious picked up during the day, but when you go to sleep, suddenly there comes to the mind, oh, that person said something and I didn't pick it up, or whatever, things like that. And so that can really prevent you from falling asleep. So I do find that I love to, chants come to me during the day. Sometimes I just hear a snippet, or where I don't know where they come from. So I'll lie in bed and I'll mentally chant to myself and so on. So use the process of sleep as a process of using an affirmation, whether literally or figuratively, an affirmation of God's love, God's presence, etc. Cradle it there, so that when you dream, you may dream of Him as resting on the fragrant altar of sleep. Isn't that beautiful? As Krishna or Christ or peace or bliss. So here he's referring to two aspects of the spiritual path, both of which have great value to us. One is the impersonal aspect of God, and the other is the personal aspect. Until one becomes a devotee of God and form in the I-thou relationship, and particularly in our culture, we can start by communing with God in the form of peace, in the form of love, in the form of joy. And that's more the impersonal form. But then by degrees, by the depth of our sincerity and devotion to God in that impersonal form, it's as if the Ishta Devata, God rises out of the waters of our consciousness and takes human form. The whole issue of the importance of having a guru is hotly debated in people's minds and here and there, and some saying you don't need a guru, and some saying you do need a guru, and everyone else rather confused about it in between. Some days they do, and some days thems don't. There's two kinds of people, I always say. And yet, the creation is a game of hide and seek. And in the creation, we've been created to seek God by our own free will and to realize that Tattvamasi, we are that we in this human form, with this instrument called the ego, are actually divine beings. We are one with the Father, as Jesus was one with the Father. The purpose of creation is to realize that in human form. Well, any form, but we're in human form, and the human form Yogananda has taught us is designed to realize God by its more advanced technological functionality, frontal lobe of the brain, and so on and so forth. This is why we are usually described, the human body is usually described as the most advanced form, at least on this planet. Anyway, and so the Ishta Devata, that form of God, comes to us in living presence or in the ever-living form of the Guru. And because ultimately God becomes personal in us. And thus, how do we have to recognize the personal incarnation of God first in another form, whether right in front of me or, like Jesus Christ or Krishna or Yogananda or Buddha in a prior physical form, but nonetheless in human form. And so this is when I won't say we advance, because some people start immediately with the human form. Does that mean they've advanced past? It doesn't necessarily mean any of that. Some of us go by the more impersonal way, and others by the more personal way. The impersonal way sought solely is more troublesome, is more difficult. How do you love that which you have never met? How do you love that which you cannot see? How do you love that which has no name and no form? Difficult, Krishna says, is that particular way for embodied beings. In any case, I need to get back to where I was. And where was I? Be drunk with God. And so God comes to you as peace or ever bliss, or as Krishna, or Christ, or as Buddha, or as Yogananda. In the temple of sleep or dreams, feel God as peace. Actually, God embraces you on his bosom as peace and joy when you go to sleep in your subconscious chamber or in your temple of dreams. The joy we feel in sleep is the joy of our soul. Then you are sleeping locked in his arms of tranquility. So before you fall asleep, realize that you are going to embrace him in sleep and in dreams. So this is the counsel that Yogananda gives to us. And, the metaphor and the actual experience of sleep has been taught down through thousands of years by the yogis particularly. At least I don't know of any other tradition that has used sleep as a metaphor and a leverage to leverage us into a greater reality. When we wake from a dream, we realize it's only a dream. Well, on a little bit of reflection, is this a dream too? Will we wake from this? And the great saints and masters of East and West tell us, yes, it is but a dream of the Almighty. It isn't our dream, it is his dream. And so and Patanjali even references the sleep state as a way of experiencing and moving towards the great state of Turiya, in which we, the self, the soul, is present even when we sleep. And Yogananda demonstrated that, and as have other great masters. And Sri Yukteswar, there's some humorous stories that even though their body was sleeping, they heard everything and so forth. So don't just conk out in sleep. Go into sleep super consciously. And the last thing I'll say is a little thing that Yogananda taught us, which I have had the blessed experience from time to time. Whether falling asleep, right, from conscious to the subconscious, the bottom of the brain, or rising, it's possible to slip into a semi-superconscious state as we rise or fall between conscious and subconscious. And I can't tell you how to do that other than to intend to do that, and it's just so blissful. There you are lying down and you just feel so blissful he called it semi-super consciousness. I think it could take you to full super consciousness too, but I think it's safer because why do I say it's safer? Because in my experience, the I principle is still there. It is still I experiencing this blissful state. So try that. Okay, folks, that's it for today.